Here are the steps for the type image portrait. Launch Photoshop. Open up one of those portrait files from our previous unit, and then select the crop tool on the left in the toolbar. Make sure that your ratio is 2:3. That's a standard photo frame size. And then with that crop tool, with a ratio of 2:3, probably bring it down. We want to reduce the space around the top of the head and the sides of the head. So there's no worries about cropping a little bit of the bottom of the body, the shoulders. The main thing is to get in closer on that background. Make the portrait the main subject. A little bit of room is good, but not too much. Once you feel that you're in a nice balanced ratio of like head or background or positive versus negative space, double click or hit the check mark at the top. Now, I'm going to keep going with the demo, but just so you know, in the pull down menu of Window, my workspace is Essentials Default. And on the side here, you'll want to be able to see your layers. You may want to have a history tab to go back in time. Maybe not in a Michael J. Fox Back to the Future or Hot Tub Time Machine kind of way, but certainly in a Photoshop way. And those are the two things that you'll need to see. Now, I'm going to select the portrait and cut it out from the background. You could do this with the polygon tool and just do it manually, bit by bit, but there's also a really good tool in new Photoshop called the Object Selection Tool. It's 4 down, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right click on that guy, and then select Object Selection Tool. It should work for us because our portraits are on a blank background. Come on top of the head face subject, and I'm getting a magenta pinky kind of look thing. Maybe that's the same for you with default. And then I'm going to left click once. When I move away, I can see the marching ants without the pink color, and the default settings work pretty well. So that should work for us. Now we're going to come on up to the top and click on Select and Mask. Select and Mask. Default color might be a little bit of a red background. Come on over to the options on the right-hand side. I think the selection's going to be fine for this, but maybe you could give it a little bit of a feather. I put in 2, just so that the edge doesn't look too harsh. Scroll down to the very bottom. This sometimes can be hard to see. There's a little tiny area that says Output to Selection. Click on the drop-down arrow, and instead of Selection, make sure that that says Layer Mask. Output to Layer Mask. Click OK. Now the subject has been separated from the background. Now let's make a black background, which works best for this assignment. We're going to go to the bottom of our layer panel, hover over that little circle shape, create new fill or adjustment layer. Click on that. We're going to go with solid color and then create a pure black, something that either looks nice and deep black on the screen, or if you want to type in the values to ensure you've got the deepest black, that's fine. So it fills it in. We can't see it because the portrait is behind, so I'm going to go to the layer panel, click on my portrait, and drag it above the fill. Left click and drag so that we can see the black background. Now let's come on over to our toolbar. Select the T for text tool. Left click and drag an area where the text is going to go. Now you'll notice that I'm intentionally leaving a little bit of extra room on the right hand side and the bottom. And that might prove a little bit easier if you want the entire body and head and shoulders of your subject to be filled in. You'll kind of see later how that works. I'm going to go with just lorem ipsum text, just for the purpose of this demonstration. So I've already copied it, and I'm just Command V, 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 and I'm pasting. And now I'm going to make sure that my text layer, coming on over to the layer panel, make sure that your text is under the portrait. And then I'm going to go up to my portrait layer. That's the photo of the subject. And I'm going to right click on this. And I'm going to select Create Clipping Mask. Right click on the portrait layer, Create Clipping Mask. And now we'll see that there are letters coming through the subject. Now I'm going to make another adjustment layer, black and white. I'm going to just go with the properties that are given, and just for the purpose of ease and making this assignment a little bit easier for us to try, I'm going to make mine black and white. Can you go with color in this assignment? Or could you try color? Is color possible? Sure, it is. I'm going to go black and white, and I think black and white might be just a little bit easier to see the effect that we're using. So now we can see the text going through the photo, but it's hard to see the image. There's just not a lot of detail there. So at this point, you need to spend some time adjusting the size of all of the text. So we're going to go to Window. In case you don't see it, Window pull-down menu, select Character. So now we've got all these options available to us for not just the font size, not just the font choice, but lots of other things too, like leading, kerning, tracking. And let's use this and make some adjustments so that we can see more detail in the portrait. So I'm going to go to my text layer. I'm going to get the cursor flashing. Command A, select all text. And I'm going to reduce the size of the font until I feel that I'm seeing more detail. I'm also going to change the leading. And it's up to you what you think looks good. What I'm doing might not be exactly what you want, but I have shrunk my font. I have reduced the leading. And I've also, and this is an important thing, I've chosen a font that has a bit of weight to it, that has some thickness. I've gone with Helvetica Bold, and you may find that choosing a font that is too thin, choosing a font that's a very light script font may not look good for this project. So try a font that works. Try a font that renders the values of the photo in a way that creates enough detail that you think the effect is working. And if you don't like it, That's okay. You can go Command A on the text layer and do what you think works for you. Changing the size, changing the leading, it is personal preference. I've decided to go with something smaller, closer together leading, a thick font, because I kind of want to just show you how the detail is rendering itself through the text. Sometimes bigger can look better, sometimes chunky can be good, but it all depends. So this essentially is creating this type image portrait. And for a lot of people, this is kind of where they stop. They just end here and they like this effect, but we're going to take it a step further. Once you've got the font, the text, the leading, the size and all that, the content of what you want the words and the letters to be, we're going to now apply photo curves to the text. This is a thing that new versions of Photoshop can do. Come on over to your layer. And we're going to select the whole layer so that it's blue. And then you're going to do a Command J and copy it. Then on the copied layer, right click, and we're going to delete the layer mask. And sometimes this can be, this messes me up because you have to make sure that you right click on the black white head, okay? Like you see the cutout thing, right click on that part. Yeah, okay, now I've got it. And then we see this option called delete layer mask. So now that this is a regular layer with no smart masking attached to it, we're going to go to pull down menu filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And we're going to make this layer blurry. Like you could obviously exaggerate it and go really wild blurry. You could have 0 or minimum and it's sharp. I honestly don't know what the best effect is. I'm thinking a little bit blurry is good. I'm going to go with 3. So we're going to allow the image to show itself with values of light to dark, but we don't want it to be super duper detailed. And we're going to give it probably a little bit of blur. Somewhere from 2 to 4 pixels. I'm not sure. It worked for me. Now, I'm going to go to File, pull down menu, Save As. Ooh, this is getting next level. I'm going to save this file, and I'm going to call it Displacement. We are going to save this version as Displacement. Now, you could call it whatever you want, but essentially we're creating like another file for Photoshop to upload to put the text on top. So I'm going to call it Displacement. I'm going to save it somewhere where I know I can retrieve it. I'm going to make sure that Maximize Compatibility checkmark is on. And now that I finished it, now that I saved it as this other file called Displacement, I'm going to select that blurry layer, right click, and I'm going to delete it. Yes, to delete. Now, selecting the text layer in your layer panel, I'm going to go to Filter, pull down menu, Distort, Displace. And we're going to get some options that pop up. I'm going to select Convert to Smart Object. And then we're going to get some displacement options. And you might see 10 by 10 as your option, and you can change it to whatever number you want. And it's kind of like deciding how much should the text be wrapping over the contours of the photo of the face, a little bit or a lot. So I'm going to go with 2 by 2 and make sure that it says stretch to fit is on, repeat edge pixels is on, and check mark on embed file data. So I'll say OK. And then we can go and click on the displacement file that we previously saved. Go back to where it was and open. And then it's going to think, and then it's going to apply that displacement to your image. Now, don't worry if you don't like it, because you can always go back and fix it. So there's no harm in just going 10 by 10 or, and just seeing what it looks like. So now at this point, and the effect might be very obvious or it might be subtle, but instead of just the straight text going over the face, you'll notice, and you might need to zoom in to see this, that the text and the letters are actually in some cases wrapping around the form of the face. They're changing their baseline, as it were. They're not all perfectly horizontal. So it just gives this little bit of like extra three-dimensionality to the image. So now at this point, it's all about editing, and it's all about making little adjustments. So at this point, you might not like, for example, the lightness and the darkness. We want to have this to be a full value range of black and white. So we could go to Adjustment, Layer, and add levels. And then we'll put levels at the top of our layer chain. And then if you double click on it, double click here. Yes, okay. Double click on this part here, that's the actual levels. And I can see that in terms of levels, my whites aren't that bright. So you could bring the right-hand side marker, left click and drag it. And oh yeah, that looks so much better. Now I've got a fuller value range. My whites are a little brighter, but my blacks are nice and deep. So if we print these, they're just going to look amazing. And the contrast is going to be a little bit more punchy and bright. So I prefer levels up there at the top. Another adjustment that you might want to make at this point is the wraparound, the displacement thing. So if you go into your layer image, you can see displace is one of your layers, and there's a little eyeball beside it. So if you double click on that, it brings you back to this window, and you can change this. You could say 5 by 5, 8 by 8, 10 by 10, and then you just say OK, and then it brings you back to your displacement file. You open it, you repeat the process, and it does it again. You can do that as many times as you want with different things, different settings. It doesn't matter. What do you think looks good? Now, the other thing that you can edit at this point is text. Maybe you're seeing that now that I see it, I just don't think that the letters are big enough or small enough. I don't think the lettering is close enough together. I think it would look better if my text had this or that. So you can change it. Select the text layer, double click on the square here to the left, and it's going to open up just the text. And you can see how my text is all hovering there. You can click and find your flashing cursor, and depending on the size of the text, it might be almost impossible to see, but if you zoom in and if you get closer, of course, you can adjust your text. You could select all of it. You could add more, whatever you need to do. You could, if you wanted to, change the text entirely and turn it into a completely new thing in terms of content. Once you've edited the text layer, you go File, Save. That saves your changes. And then you gotta X that out. Oops, I have an extra layer that I didn't mean to do. X out that file, like close the file. And then it'll come back to your original document, and whatever changes you made in the text will be shown here. Now, notice also how it changes the name to displacement. So once you feel that you're happy with everything, you've edited the text, you've changed displacement, maybe you've changed contrast, brightness, levels. Once that's done, you're going to go to File, pull-down menu, Save As, and then we will give this a more proper name for the purpose of our class and how we manage files. Put your full name as the first part of the file, and then you can call it something else if you like type image portrait. And then we're going to save that Photoshop document with all of the layers to a location. Maximize compatibility. And so we'll upload a Photoshop version with all of the layers to a shared Google Drive space, and that'll be available inside the classroom assignment. And then upload a second JPEG version to Discovery. The JPEG version, once you've uploaded the Google version, the Google Drive with all the layers version, you can go to File, pull-down menu, and this is very much like InDesign, Export. And then you're going to export as. You'll see that the format up here at the top should be JPEG. We're going to put the quality to high, crank it to the right as high as it'll go. And then export, and you can save it as the same file name if you want, because this one's a JPEG, so it won't write over the last one you did, and hit save. And so now in the location that you have, you should have both versions now. The PSD that goes to Google Drive with all the layers, and your type image portrait that goes to Discovery Classroom. And I don't think that that's going to go over 20 megabytes. No, it doesn't. That should upload just fine.